Since the release of the probable cause affidavit, many have questioned surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen's response, and Dylan has definitely caught a lot of flack from the online community and beyond. I will admit that I myself had a shocked and then horrified reaction after learning that surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen saw the perpetrator, heard what she heard, and then retreated to her bedroom, locked her door, and the authorities were not called until over 8 hours later. I personally had to take a few days off of creating content to return to my textbooks to try to make sense of what happened that horrible night, particularly in regards to surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen's reported response per the PCA. According to the training that I've had in psychology and in preparation to become a behavioral therapist, there are 5 primary human responses to shock, 5 primary physiological responses to shock that we are not necessarily in control of when we are undergoing this state of shock. These responses are sometimes referred to as the 5 Fs, and those Fs stand for freeze, flop, and friend, as well as fight or flight. I will go more into what those 5 Fs mean exactly, or what they look like in an actual human response, but let's first take a look at the PCA in the part that is relevant to what we're talking about here in regards to what Dylan Mortensen reported her response to be that horrible evening or early morning of November 13th, 2022. It should be noted in the probable cause affidavit, the initials DM stand for the name of surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen. DM stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the 2nd floor. DM stated she was awoken at approximately 4 a.m. by what she stated sounded like Gonsalves playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms, which were located on the 3rd floor. A short time later, DM said she heard who she thought was Gonsalves say something to the effect of, "There's someone here." A review of records obtained from a forensic download of Kernodle's phone showed this could have also been Kernodle, as her cellular phone indicated she was likely awake and using TikTok app at approximately 4:12 a.m. DM Dylan Mortensen stated she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house. DM stated she opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. Oh, God. DM then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, quote, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," end quote. At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a resident immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, picked up a distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Kernodle's bedroom. DM stated she opened her door for the 3rd time after she heard the crying and saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. DM described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past DM as she stood in a frozen shock phase. That's a quote. The male walked down towards the back sliding glass door. DM locked herself in her room after seeing the male. DM did not state that she recognized the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. In regards to the 911 call itself, I'm going to read you an excerpt from an article from the Today Show, and it should be noted that this article was released on November 21st, 2022, about a week after the tragedy. The headline says, "Police release new information about the University of Idaho murders, including who called 911. It goes on to say, multiple people spoke with a dispatcher during the call made at 11:58 a.m. to report an unconscious person, police said. More than a week after the 4 University of Idaho students were found slain in a home near campus, investigators are releasing more details about the attack that appear to clear some people with ties to the victims. The 911 call came from the phone of one of the 2 surviving roommates who were home at the time of the killings, according to a statement from the Moscow Police Department. Police said the surviving roommates called friends over to the house on November 13th because they believed one of their roommates had passed out. Multiple people spoke with the dispatcher during the 911 call made at 11:58 a.m. to report an unconscious person, according to police. The article goes on to say, the 2 surviving roommates and the friends called to the house are not believed to be involved in the crime, according to police. Okay, so in order to break this down, I just want to pull out the pieces that I read from the probable cause affidavit that are most relevant to people having questions and some criticizing surviving roommate Dylan Mortensen for not acting sooner. So it was that Dylan Mortensen was awoken because she thought she heard Kelly playing with a dog. Then she said she thought she heard Kelly's voice saying, "Someone's here." She looked out the door at that time, didn't see anyone. She then says that she thought she heard Xana crying, and she looked out the door, didn't see anyone there. She then thought she heard a male voice saying, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She looked out the door, and she saw the perpetrator as she described him, as you heard in the probable cause affidavit. I want to turn to her language, frozen, shocked phase. So she says that she found herself in a frozen, shocked phase. We don't know how much time passed. She retreated back into her room, locked the door, and according to what we know from the probable cause affidavit, we don't know what happened after that. At least a few seconds had to pass by because she says the perpetrator walked by her with his 5'10", about 185-pound self and bushy eyebrows, and headed towards the back sliding glass door. So again, this is around 4 a.m., early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. And we know that the police were called at 11:58 a.m., approximately 8 hours later, under what is really just a very curious situation. I guess we don't have enough information to really have a clear picture of what happened. We know that the roommates had called other people over to the house, and it was after those other people arrived to the house that the 911 call was made from one of the roommates' phones. We don't know which one, and several people talked to the 911 dispatcher. Like what? That's always been some facts of this case that people have questioned, and rightfully so. It's just really kind of like confusing and chaotic. But I'm sure that whatever the situation was there at 1122 King Road was extremely confusing and likely extremely chaotic. So before we go into the 5 possible responses to fear or trauma that humans undergo physiologically, it's important to understand this. On a physiological level, the human brain responds to danger in a variety of ways, and the way in which you respond to danger is not necessarily and often is not by conscious choice. If a traumatic event signifies a threat to one's safety, for example, it creates a physical and emotional reaction within the self that activates the sympathetic nervous system, this is also known as the SNS, or a fight and flight response, both of which are necessary for survival. It might trigger that fight or flight response. So it has been discovered through research and is often referred to in this way through textbook literature that the human brain has three independent competing minds at work within it. Okay, let's break it down. There's the reptile, the part of the brain, the brainstem that's responsible for survival instincts and independent or autonomic body processing. There's the mammalian part of the brain, the mammalian or midbrain. It's often referred to as the emotional brain, and it is responsible for processing emotions and conveying sensory information. Now there's also the neocortex. The neo-mammalian complex includes the cerebral cortex, which is a structure that can be found in certain mammals and humans. This part of the brain is responsible for language abstraction, planning, and perception. So in essence, what happens is this, and if this is hard to understand or difficult to follow, I'm going to be doing a live stream to follow up with this material. Essentially, in the event of a trauma, the reptilian part of the brain becomes activated, alerting the body to go into survival mode. And at this point, the SNS, that sympathetic nervous system, prepares for fight or flight, freeze, flop, or friend. Once the brain shifts back to normal functioning, it can process information with a variety of sensory inputs and outputs. The cognitive processing is called top-down processing, okay? So the top-down processing is driven by cognition, by thinking, conscious thought, and it's based on perception. The brain responds to what it knows and what it expects based on past experiences and works in an almost predictable fashion, which allows for the successful processing of external experiences. However, in trauma, brain chemicals such as stress hormones become stuck and they can't be replenished, leaving the survivor in a permanent reactive state. This is what I believe Dylan Mortensen was referring to when she said the frozen shock phase. Very accurately, she described what she was going through in a very non-conscious level. So this was actually probably extremely perceptive of her. Okay, so let's go back to those 5 possible responses to extreme fear, trauma, or threat, which are flop, freeze, friend, fight, and flight, okay? So all of these are activated by the sympathetic nervous system, and remember, when we are faced with extreme fear, trauma, or threat, and the sympathetic nervous system takes over, we do not have a conscious choice as to which of these we choose. So let's start with friend. This, of course, like everything else, starts when we're babies. We learn that by crying out for help, by getting the attention of a caregiver, another human being, then our needs are going to be met. We eventually start to expand our worldview and we start to gain friends or get what it is we need by smiling and making other friendly gestures in order to get what we need. So when faced with extreme fear or trauma, one of the reactions one might engage in, according to the sympathetic nervous system, remember, which comes from this reptilian mind, which is more connected to our intuition than the mammalian mind. It just hopefully chooses correctly for us. One of the option is to friend, which is also known as to fawn or flock or to appease. So you might be appeasing to the person who is threatening you. In this case, according to Dylan Mortensen's intelligent reptilian sympathetic nervous system, this was not an option. Another option is to freeze. Think of when, animals, evolved animals, are out in nature and they are faced with a threat, some of them might be equipped with something like camouflage. So if they freeze, hopefully they're just going to mix in with their background. They're not going to be seen by their predator, by their threat, and all is good. Or they might freeze behind a bush or a tree or in the water, someplace where they think either the predator, the threat, is not going to see them, or where that predator is not going to go to get them, because when they are frozen in this place, it would pose more of a threat to the predator to pursue them in this frozen spot. Remember that reptilian mind that is activated by the sympathetic nervous system when our intelligent body's response activates the sympathetic nervous system is really smart, it's really intuitive, and hopefully it selects the best choice, okay? Then there's also flop. So flop represents a last defense and comes into operation when freeze is not successful. So basically the flop option is going to be the, the proverbial playing dead option. So when you freeze, there's still a level of threat. Maybe the predator, the threat, is still pursuing you. Then the next option might be to flop or to play dead. So in this case, let's say with, Dylan Mortensen, feeling like she's in that, frozen shock phase, she retreats to her bedroom. She sees this person coming towards her. I'm imagining he didn't see her. I don't know. Or maybe he had just had it. Maybe he was injured. Maybe he was done. Maybe he was exhausted and he was going to leave. We really don't know that. And we might never know. Her retreating into her room and locking her door, and maybe then, maybe the next thing she did was to jump into bed, go under the covers, pull the covers way up over her head. In this case, she went into flop mode, or, the proverbial playing dead, right? This makes sense too. So if we were to define flight, it's a response that seeks to put distance between the threat and the person. So it might involve fleeing the scene or hiding from the perceived threat. In this case, probably her running, trying to flee the scene, would just put her in a greater stage of danger, according to her smart, intuitive, reptilian mind that was triggered by the sympathetic nervous system being activated. Not a good choice. In this case, a variety of chemicals get released, providing energy to the larger muscles in the body. That might be why we tend to run a whole lot faster than normal when we're being chased. The adrenaline is produced in seconds, and it is mediated by the primary instinct part of the brain to survive. All right. And then there is, of course, fight. This is often used as a backup response if an individual finds that the primary fear response, friend, is ineffective. So usually you first, even if for a moment, will try to friend the predator or the imposing threat. Simply put, fight is a survival strategy that can often result in a person demonstrating overt aggression or subtle aggression cues, such as the use of aggressive language or action. So, screaming at somebody, cursing at them, trying to say horrible things to get them away, or literally, physically fighting.
Four students found each had multiple stab wounds. Some had defensive wounds, showing they fought with the attacker. And there was no sexual assault. County Coroner Kathy Mabbutt is describing the murders as personal.